Test, 1, 2. All right. Everybody found Google okay today? Big hanger. Do you guys know what was here in this place? The spruce goose. I talked to people about the spruce goose, and they're like, yeah, spruce. I go, you don't even know what the spruce goose is. Do you know what the spruce goose is before you came here?
No.
No. Do you know what it is now?
No.
They're going to tell us about it. Drew, did you?
I learned from you on the drive in.
It's pretty fascinating. I'm not going to talk about that right now. We're going to talk about NIL. How many people, when they hear NIL, even knows what that means? Raise your hands. A lot of people don't. This is like one of the biggest things that happen in sports in this country, I would say, for that matter, right? NIL stands for name, image, and likeness. And why it's important, we're going to get into. And how it relates to selling stuff and getting brands involved, we're going to talk to. And we're really lucky to have this great panel right here. On my right, Drew Butler came in from Atlanta, Georgia, home of the SEC. How many people know what the SEC is? All right.
Not the Security and Exchange Commission?
No.
Southeastern Conference, correct.
So, Drew, you played football, I believe, right?
I did. I played at the University of Georgia, and then I played in the NFL for 5 seasons with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Arizona Cardinals. Way back when. My last year was 2017.
Way back when.
So,
What do you have, your 35th birthday coming up or something?
That's right, 35, and then
Lots
about 10
changed
days.
since
A
you
lot
started
has
playing
changed.
football,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Bananas.
absolutely.
And right to my right, Chase Griffin. How you doing?
Doing well.
Local guy via Dallas.
Austin.
Austin. Stand corrected. That's a thing, Austin and Dallas? Is it?
Dallas, all
You
right.
guys beef, Austin, Dallas?
Not really. No,
All
we
right.
in our own lane.
So tell us what your background is real quick.
I was actually born down the road at UCLA Santa Monica. My parents didn't want me growing up in LA, so I grew up
Why?
outside Austin. It's very fast out here. It's good to be in college here though. But grew up outside of Austin, a town called Round Rock. Went to Hutto High School. Had the full Friday Night Lights experience. Got to UCLA in 2019. I've been a quarterback there for the past 5 years, going into my 6th year. Got an extra year because of COVID.
We're going to talk about that 6-year plan. You know, when I was a kid, the 6-year plan was bad. Your parents were like, what do you mean? Just got to take 2 years to get your degree. This is the COVID, that silver lining for athletes, right? You got to play extra time and spend more time in school.
Yeah, I mean, more time in school, more degrees, and more free housing.
All right, that's positive. Any Bruins fans in the house? UCLA Bruins fans? All right, that's cool. Well, believe it or not, Drew didn't really talk a whole lot about it because we're going to get into it when I ask him questions about NIL and why we should care, for that matter. NIL was, I believe, at the time 2.5 years ago when it first became legal.
Yeah, July 1, 2021.
Explain what happened.
On July 1st, 2021, the NCAA, really at the 11th hour, because states were putting their own laws into effect to say student athletes within our state have protections to monetize their name, image, and likeness. And before July 1, 2021, that was the ultimate no-no. You'd lose your eligibility, the school would get in trouble, the kid couldn't play anymore, there'd be huge investigations. That was the one kind of downfall of being a student athlete, even if you were on full academic scholarship, is that you had no earning potential outside of being in school and having your school paid for. So at the 11th hour, literally June 30th, the NCAA came out and said, you know what? All 50 states, kids can monetize their name, image, and likeness on July 1st, 2021. And in that moment, kids were allowed to monetize their name, image, and likeness, but essentially there were no rules or regulations past that. And now here we are almost 3 years to the day, and there are still more innovations and opportunities that really come up hourly, it seems like, Chase.
And just recently, what happened to Reggie Bush?
Got his Heisman back.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, SC gonna do what they need to do.
Sports is so much politics. We're talking a lot about branding and how it relates to it, but like you could get these guys talking about sports and politics within sports and everything else. But most recently, Reggie Bush, you might know who he was. You probably might know him because of Kim Kardashian. Like they had a thing, right? Kim Kardashian.
I think so.
Yeah, they did. I think they had a thing. But Reggie Bush, you know, he got busted for taking money allegedly. Then it kind of proved it, and then they like banned him from his Heisman, and he just got it back. It was a really big deal. When he went to the pros, that's when he started making money. But many people don't know that college athletes aren't rich. And even though you get a scholarship, it's still hustle, right? And a lot of families come out of that. Drew, you went to Georgia, you're at UCLA. How hard is it for these athletes to make it through school, most of them?
Well, I mean, I have teammates that send their cost of living stipends home. So there's some athletes where they're the first person in their town, first person in their family, or first person from their school to go to college, let alone be on scholarship. So I think when you look at NIL, it's really part of athlete empowerment, part of talent empowerment. We're sort of seeing that, it's funny that a lot of these developments happen at the same time as the strikes. So there's really a coalescence between empowerment in media, whether it be more conventional forms of media or sports media. And I think as linear TV relies more and more on sports to be the main driver of subscriptions or viewership, college athletes have a huge part to play in the media landscape going forward.
I think, to also kind of humanize the element pre-NIL, and I know this to be a fact. So COVID happens in 2020. This is before NIL. So universities push all their students home. Hey, you can't be here. You can't be on campus. So at the University of Georgia, you have a lot of kids in these small rural towns in South Georgia, in Florida, that do not come from a lot of means. Now their parents are at home. Their parents are not working. You have multiple siblings. You're all crammed inside your house. Yes, they're still sending those scholarship checks to the kids. These kids are giving the money to their parents. And at Georgia, they were actually packaging together food to send home to these kids and to these families, but they had to figure out how they could do it so they couldn't get in trouble from the NCAA. Think about that. So they're taking all of these snacks and food like they have outside for us here, that's no different from an athletic department, and they're saying, hey, it's not being used. Can we send this back to the kids who need it for their families? And they were able to circumvent the crazy rules that the NCAA had put in place prior to NIL being legal, because the kids could not get added benefits outside their scholarship. So now these kids have the opportunity to make money through marketing and through advertising for brands in their local and regional areas, which is, that's phenomenal for sure.
So Drew and I worked at a company called Icon Source, which is a digital marketplace. We actually did the first NIL deal in history in the middle of Times Square, 12:01 a.m. How many, almost 3 years ago, July, right?
Yeah.
And it was with 2 female athletes. And what we did on purpose was we picked 2 female athletes because when this whole thing was coming about, everybody thought, it's the quarterback's going to get more money. They're not going to have to put it in a brown bag now. They can give this, legally. But what we realize is that there's 470,000 student athletes in this country. That's a lot. Their influence in these micro doses, if you will, in their communities, like if you went to Tennessee, you'd probably know who the basketball player or the football player was at Tennessee, even the guard or the forward, somebody that wasn't as popular, and you're really passionate about that team and that community. But if you didn't, you really wouldn't know who these people are. You really wouldn't care. And so what we were thinking about was, what if the average person who he was just talking about, what if you could get money into the hands of kids just for being on a team that people want to support, kind of like the local brands? So how much impact did you see, because you have been a part of these deals, in local brands trying to connect with their consumers versus some of the big national brands, Drew? Why don't you tell me a little bit, Drew? Start out telling me about that.
Yeah, I think from the jump, we saw a lot of interest from the local brands in these areas. You're talking about credit unions, car dealerships, small banks, restaurants in these college towns. They had no idea what NIL was. We went to them and said, hey, would you be interested? You're going to first and foremost get a ton of awesome, positive PR around doing a very small deal. $500 here, $1,000 there. We'll circle up some great advertisement for you. We'll reach out to a local newspaper or television station. And just from that $500, those brands came back to us in droves and said, that was amazing. We were written about. People were calling us. They were really excited about the player that we paired up with. And it was cool to see because everybody won in that scenario. The small business got a great pop. More people were walking into their restaurant. The student athlete made some money. The student athlete was able to activate on social media in many different forms and fashions. And that right there was the true sense of name, image, and likeness. Yeah, it's kind of been morphed into something that really has kind of gotten away from that. But the opportunity for all the people in the audience today is to truly understand what can happen positively for your brand or for your company when you activate not only a student athlete, but a bunch of student athletes.
I think that's what we want to talk about.
Right.
Chase, you were an early adopter as an athlete. Were there a bunch of athletes that you were trying to convince, like, this is a real thing? You can make money. You can make the connections that you need to have.
I think even for myself, I didn't really know how it was going to go at first. Really, for the past 50 or 60 years, the status quo has been college athletes have been barred from participating or realizing their value that they can add to a business. That's why it's really a win-win. Not only is it good for the businesses to be able to get on campus and tap in with some of the biggest platforms on these campuses, but at the same time, college athletes for the first time are learning business acumen. And I think it's not really putting college athletes on a pedestal, it's just leveling the playing field for college students in general.
Yeah, that 19 to 22, 23, in some cases 24, 25 student, right? That's getting their MBA and getting a PhD, all those other things. But it's pretty wild because Chase and I met before this really even happened. I was at Hawke, and he had, connected to me through some platform, and then just kept in touch with me. And it was really admirable to watch, somebody his age really getting out there. And I think that being part of a digital marketing agency at Hawke, engagement rate's really important. Like, you can go do a deal and have somebody that's got millions of followers, but are they really looking at my message? Are they really listening to the story that I'm trying to tell, on YouTube? And there's some great platforms, right? So with college students, if the average college student probably has like 2,500 followers, like whatever, they're just a student athlete, right? They have 2,500, 4,000. Some of them have 100,000, 200,000. But mainly if you're just a kid playing like lacrosse at, Bowdoin or something, you're going to have 2,500. But the engagement rates of those people are so huge compared to the really famous athletes that everybody knows about, right? How does that play a part?
We did a series on social media where we were talking with former and current student athletes about NIL. This is right when it started. We got some pretty awesome guests to start. One was a defensive tackle for the Carolina Panthers named Derek Brown, very popular in the Southeast. He went to Auburn. He was a top 10 pick. So we asked him questions. We have him on there. The engagement was fairly okay. I mean, he had probably close to 100,000 followers. The next guest that we had, Maceo Teague, had just got drafted into the NBA. He had just won a national championship at Baylor. A big athlete, right? Engagement, it was okay. We had an intern at Icon Source. She was a soccer player at Florida. She says, hey, you should interview my roommate. She's a 3-time All-American softball player. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. We get her.
Did you say that right away? That sounds great. She's a softball player, and she's not like a football player.
Of course I did. So we do the social media stream, and the engagement was off the charts. I couldn't even keep up with the live comments. All of these softball girls who think she's an absolute star, all of the moms are in this as well, asking questions in real time because they know that their daughters absolutely love this softball player. All of her teammates and her peers from around the SEC were in there as well. I'm sitting there going, what just happened? I walked out of my office. My wife goes, I was just watching that. That was really remarkable. You've done a bunch of these. That had way more engagement. She had so fewer followers than everybody else that we had done. She had so much of a smaller kind of social footprint. But since she was that niche star, softball is huge in the Southeast. She had such huge engagement. My eyes kind of opened. I was like, holy cow, that was really, really special. So you can see the opportunity for those smaller sports when the engagement is, probably close to 90, 95%. People wanted to know what Kendall Lindemann was up to, what's she doing, what is she liking, what has she been up to, and it was really cool to see.
What do you attribute that to, Chase?
I think the power of sports, and especially college sports. Part of the reason why I chose UCLA was because of the pedigree of college athletes who had changed the world, like Jackie Robinson, Jackie Joyner-Kersee, Flo Jo, Arthur Ashe, Ed O'Bannon, who's really the godfather of NIL. And when you look at the progress that has been made by college athletes, obviously it helps other athletes in their sport. Like, obviously, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are helping other women's basketball athletes, but they're helping athletes in general. They're helping media marketers and linear TV see that if you empower young women, you will have more viewers than even the young men that they've been empowering for the status quo for the past 100 years. So I think through sports, it's really a testing grounds of challenging the status quo and seeing how all stakeholders benefit by empowering the athletes who make it possible.
I mean, anybody watch the NCAA Women's Championship? They had record numbers. It was over the top. Why do you think that happened? Do you think one day they just went, hey, these women can make baskets and stuff? Or what happened? And then Why should a brand care? And now that I think most brands don't understand now how they can engage and be a part of that storytelling, because it's some pretty fantastic storytelling. And if you've been in this business long enough, you realize it's all about storytelling and putting your brand in the middle of the consumer and the person telling the story and having that interrelatable moment, right?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons for that. One is these girls are superstars. You know, you mentioned Caitlin Clark, you mentioned Angel Reese, Van Lith from LSU, Paige Beckers from up at UConn. They are stars, and they have gigantic followings, but also in that they've been at these schools for 3 or 4 years. Men's college basketball has become very transitory. They're out in a year. Hey, I want to go to the NBA. I'll be in school for 8 months on campus, and then I'm gone. I'm getting the bag. So they're not really entrenched in their community like that. Those girls, first and foremost, legit superstars. Number two, ESPN has the rights to women's college basketball. So they were shoving it down our throats. Sports Center, early morning, they knew that they had something special, and it really worked out because they outperformed the men's national championship.
Yeah, they crushed them.
Think about that, by millions of viewers. So it was a great combination of one, great product, two, superstars, three, ESPN sitting there saying, we think people want to watch this. Let's lead in with it and see how they respond. And then you had awesome competitions as well. Caitlin Clark made a ton of money, and she earned it, which was the best
Has
part.
she benefited from NIL?
I mean, you think? I remember I had a buddy in town, Chase. I mean, I don't know if you could say the same, but it was that Monday night. It was the Iowa LSU Elite Eight game. We sat down, 7:30, turned the game on. First time in my life I've ever had appointment television watching a women's college basketball
bunch
game.
of SEC bros
like,
watching women's basketball.
and
Who
she
saw that
filled it up.
demographic,
Yeah,
right?
awesome.
You want to get a hold of 30-something-year-old guys that are from the SEC, put on women's basketball.
go.
Signs and wonders. It's a good thing. Engaged. I was watching.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, go ahead, Chase.
I mean, I think it's how it's supposed to be. And even then, I think media is still antiquated in how we look at it. When you look at the deal that the Big Ten struck with Fox, a lot of these sports were looped in with women's college basketball. And there were billions left on the table because there is no athlete at the table saying, look, women's college basketball is the most watched sport of the year. We should have a standalone package similar to men's college basketball and similar to men's football. So there's money being left on the table for all stakeholders, which goes back to the empowerment. I think as far as different branding, you'll see a lot of the stars are coming from smaller colleges or colleges situated in smaller cities. So college athlete at LSU in Baton Rouge, LSU is really the main thing that's happening there. Here in LA, as a quarterback, I'm competing with Matt Stafford. I'm competing with Justin Herbert. So, contrary to popular belief as far as, how media normally looks at markets, we're seeing some of the smaller markets are having huge Q scores and imprints with the college athletes they work with there.
Some of the things that I watched happen early on, there was a technology company, and they worked a lot with the YMCA, for instance. This is just to give you an example. And it's a technology company. What do they have to do? Why would they want to tell a story about athletes? They do B2B. And it was really interesting because we started talking about this, and they want to support the YMCA. The YMCA supports the community. That community probably knows who the standouts or the athletes are in that particular college town. And so what this company did, it's a national company, technology company. They ended up sponsoring female athletes and male athletes in those colleges that weren't superstars to then go volunteer at the YMCAs to do clinics and these things. And then through that, they were able to tell stories. And that's the kind of stuff that you put on YouTube. That's the kind of stuff that people are dying for. They're dying for authentic storytelling. Now, the trick is, how do you do that at mass? So it's nice to be able to say, oh, this is a nice story. It's a credit union. They've got 2 offices in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But if you're talking about big dollars, if you're talking about national brands, how do those national brands get to tell those stories by using potentially, in this case, because we're talking about NIL, these college athletes that aren't superstars that you might see on TV, but they're in their community? Why do you think that those stories resonate so much with big brands? You have a deal with Chase, right? I mean, your name's Chase, but that's kind of cool. But that's not why they did it, right?
No.
All right, go ahead.
So NIL has, above everything, been an educational experience for me. It's been nice to be able to earn money while still in college, but now I know how to earn money. I know how to market myself. And once I have money, I know how to pay taxes. I know how to invest. I know how to budget. I know how to set money aside for an accountant if needed. These are all things that college athletes were barred from, which is why 80% of college athletes, once they go to professional athletics, ended up going broke. We were literally barred from practicing any type of business acumen or really any type of monetary acumen at all. With JP Morgan Chase, I've been able to credibly speak about how, as a college athlete and a college student, I've been able to practice financial health and wellness. And we're looking at a demographic within college athletics, especially revenue-generating sports, where a lot of folks are first-time earners of over $100,000 once they go into the professional world. Regardless if somebody goes pro or not, they're going to be a college graduate. And if you're a college graduate on scholarship, you don't have any student loans, you're really in a prime part of being able to create generational progress for your family. And for the first time, we have the financial health and wellness to be able to do that.
Drew, what did you see from some of the national brands that were doing deals? I know Hawke did a deal with Crocs, I think.
Yep, I remember
right?
that one.
And how many people have heard of the Cavendish twins? Anybody heard of the Cavendish twins? No, yeah. Cavendish twin, you have, okay. Cavendish twins, they're two girls that played basketball for Fresno State. Then they went to Miami. They really jumped on NIL. But Crocs was a national company. They spent a bunch of money.
Yeah.
And why do you think that they wanted to reach out to a student athlete?
Well, Crocs was having like a renaissance moment. I wasn't really aware of that, and Hawke brought Crocs to Icon Source, and I had no idea how popular Crocs were on college campuses.
How many people own Crocs right now that watch Below Deck?
There you go. You're showing your age.
No?
So they said, hey, we want to jump back in with the most influential people at these college campuses, and they did a deal at a number of different schools with elite athletes at those schools, and it resonated extremely well because they wanted to go directly to the buyer. You know, everybody on those campuses is probably following the Cavendish twins because they're some of the biggest social media influencers at that school. So when they're out there pushing Crocs, whether it's a specific new model or colorway, I have no idea. You know, that obviously resonated extremely well with their core demographic to go in there and make that purchase. So I know for a fact that Crocs saw that as highly beneficial. And going back to the national brands that really wanted to figure out a way to kind of hack what NIL is rather than going to just one major student athlete, they're spreading the web. There's a lot of different touch points and a lot of different demographics in these smaller areas that then branch out to the regional areas that then become this huge national marketing campaign. And the key differentiator between an influencer and a student athlete is that when you're on any of your social media right now and you're scrolling and you see your typical influencer, they're probably shouting out a promo code, showing you a get ready with me, whatever it is. You've come to expect that from your average influencer, not average in the size and scope that they have, but that's their business. When you go onto a student athlete's social media feed, I would say rarely you see them really giving out a promotion for a product. When you're talking about these top tier athletes like a Caitlin Clark, if she is pushing a product on her social media feed, she probably really likes it. Is she getting compensated? Yes, of course, but it's different. It makes you
And her
stop.
engagement rate's huge.
Absolutely. You go, I want to know what Caitlin Clark is drinking before she scores, 40 points in a basketball game. And so do the girls who idolize her. So that one moment that makes you kind of sit back and go, hey, I'm going to watch this and understand whatever she's pushing towards me, that's the differentiator between student athletes and influencers.
Yeah, I want you to think about for a second, you're a health and beauty product. You want to sell to women from the ages from like 15 to 22 maybe. And how do you do that? There are a lot of different ways to do it. But what if you could find 1,000 female student athletes that played sports for Ivy League schools? What if there was a way that you could filter and just and that technology will do all that for you now. But the idea was they're only going to have a couple thousand followers apiece. But if I found the girls that play track, tennis, soccer, softball, for all those schools, look at the demographic that you're able to touch with an engagement rate of like 75 or 80%. The trick is going to be how do you find all those people and put them in one place because you have a decent size ad spend. But just start thinking about college athletes that way, that you're able to tap into a place that advertisers were never able to tap into before.
Right.
Right?
Illegal.
It was illegal. And so the idea now is that you're able to tell these authentic stories. And as a brand or an agency or somebody that needs to do something different, I would really challenge you to really investigating some of this NIL stuff. Not a whole lot of hands raised. Erik Huberman, the CEO of Hawke Media, when I talk about NIL, he goes, dude, all you ever talk about is NIL. And it's not true. I talk about other stuff. But, think about it. How many people didn't think about NIL ever, listened so far to what these guys are talking about, and how many people represent brands or agencies or anyway? Okay. Do you have a different opinion now about how you might interact with a student athlete before you walked in here? Are you saying yes? All right, why is that?
So part of what I do is always trying to get audience acquisition on platforms, and the best content that we see nowadays is, user generated, and everyone knows what an influencer is going to post. So trying to acquire the middle niche type of creator that's also going to bring in more audience acquisition. You think about sports, and I never thought about college anything. I don't really watch sports, but I think it's, I understand, the value it adds. So now I'm literally taking notes, and I'm like, okay, this is how we go niche. We can acquire college athletes, part of our acquisition strategy.
I'll tell a story,
If you
Scott.
use that, you can send me 10%.
Oh, nice. What's
To
that?
tell a story about Livy Dunn. Livy is on those
Anybody
Fiore
heard
commercials.
of Livy Dunn?
Very popular
She's a gymnast
gymnast.
at
A couple of the
LSU.
guys in their back raise their hands. I saw that. She's a gymnast at LSU, and she did a deal with a software company that essentially helped students at the high school and college level prep for exams, prep for midterms. This marketing campaign went so viral that LSU's Board of Academics had to come out and say, beware of using this platform. Fox News wrote about it. CNN wrote about it. The founder of the company called us up at Icon Source and said, that's the best money I've ever spent. Best money, because they went mega viral, and it was all about his software company and activating her, and she did a great job of it as well. But it's those small moments of utilizing an influencer who is in school, who does not have a lot of time on her hands because she's waking up, going to practice, got study hall, got tutoring, got to go do lifting, then go do her meets, then all that stuff. And when she's talking about, hey, this really helped me out, everybody swarmed to it. And it went, it's kind of one of those lightning in a bottle moments, but it was pretty fascinating to see.
Chase?
I think you look at certain deals with D3 students or D2 students who are able to be good content creators, and it showcases that athletes, we really have, because of our regimen and because of the work it even gets to us, gets us to college platforms, that we know how to go through a production process, whether we've done it or not. Every single day we're preparing for a major production on Saturday where millions of dollars are generated. There's an audience, there's a venue, there's folks who made it happen, and we're the talent in all of it. Now we're just in a new realm where if you give us the means, the resources, the reps, and the ability to practice, I know that in my case, I've been able to develop immensely as a producer and on the talent side. I produce all my own shot lists. I hire all my videographers. I do all my line production, and I hire an editor. I've done, 30 plus paid productions. And I've also been the talent in all of those, all before I've even left college. And I think for college athletes, we've always been value creators. Now we're just at a point where we're able to create more values for ourselves and then also our communities. We talked a little bit earlier on how athletes have always, sort of delivered to their communities. For myself, I was able to start a foundation. I was able to start a newsletter to help empower other college athletes do the same. And what you're seeing is I'm not really an anomaly. There's other athletes.
You couldn't even have thought about that. These are things that you just get nervous thinking about it because you might,
Well, there was no experience before, and there were naysayers saying that this was going to detract from viewership or this was going to detract from your ability as a player. I think minimizing any type of talent not only hurts the talent, but hurts all the stakeholders involved.
And you ended up, I know you went up to Polo in Santa Barbara. And one of the other things we talk about with NIL is that everybody was so nervous initially. Are they going to get in trouble? Is it really legal? And we were just talking about this before this panel, that a lot of these kids still don't even know what they're doing. A lot of them still need to be educated more. The collectives, these guys that are boosters are coming in or throwing a lot of money around, they get kind of nervous. But you took on this attitude of just say yes, I want to learn and absorb as much as I can from business owners. Also, you went to this polo match. You filmed the whole thing. You put it up on your social, and then you ended up doing a deal with like Lucchese Boots or something. The guy saw you there, right?
Yeah, so it was a deal. It wasn't for a whole lot of money, but it was such a cool experience. It was at U.S. Polo Grounds up in Santa Barbara. It was beautiful. It was my first time out in Cali riding a horse, and filmed it all. I think we probably still have the best content that U.S. Polo Grounds has ever done.
Yeah, that was well done.
That was clean. That was clean. But there I met John Muse, who owns Lucchese, who's a Texas legend by his own right. And he remembered that I was Gatorade Player of the Year my senior year in Texas and said, let's talk about Lucchese. And so I ended up doing a deal with them. And, you know, way leads on the way, opportunity leads on to opportunity. And I think as college athletes are able to be in a world where we're able to say yes and really even prove to ourselves the value that we can create for others outside of our sport, helps us feel more confident about being well-rounded young men and young women.
That's great. We have time. Anybody have any questions about NIL and how it would relate to your brand? Yeah, go ahead. Let me come out here real quick. You're a projector. Okay, go ahead. All right.
I was curious, Jason, you were talking, I was wondering if you could expand a little bit more on sort of the kind of support that brands are giving you and other athletes to help develop that producer skill or skill set. And just curious, you could share with us what are the characteristics that makes brands stand out as far as providing that support resources.
Yeah, so a lot of the talent that's
Great question.
getting more, I say, cash deals, they are athletes who have either had success in the past with NIL, so they have their own sort of production regimen, or they're signed to some type of agency that helps facilitate in that production. Some brands treat them just as, you know, general productions. So they'll send a production crew, they'll have the athlete in the studio. For instance, when I hosted a 6-episode podcast for JP Morgan, they handled a lot of production. They wanted it to be a certain way. Not to say I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I think the brands that help the athletes maximize their platform to the full potential will see the, you know, more ROI on it.
Great. In the front?
Authentic stories. What are the challenges to really get a following?
The challenges to getting a following with authentic stories. I mean, I think that does ultimately fall on the brand to identify the student athlete that's going to resonate really well. If you're having a student athlete who's a freshman living in a dorm talking about your mortgage company, I think a lot of people could probably sniff that out pretty quickly. He's not paying a mortgage, so why is he cutting that deal? If you have a student athlete whose family has utilized your credit union, I keep going back to that, or your small community bank, and that community bank has worked with his family for years, that obviously will resonate. And when he cuts that advertisement, however it may look, radio, social media, television commercial, whatever it is, people in his local community are going to know it's organic. People in that region are going to know, hey, that makes sense. He's from that area. That community bank reached out to him. That's an organic deal. Those are the stories that are authentic. And I'm just giving one of those low-hanging fruit comparisons. But people will immediately have a visceral reaction to that. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I should check that out. That's pretty cool. I'm glad they were able to find each other, and that's one of those win-win situations where, you know, the rising tide definitely lifts all ships.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, so how do these NIL deals compare to, say, other influencer deals with comparable followings, and how do I get Chase to rep my brand?
I mean, he's got
Let's
people
talk-
now.
let's talk.
He's
No.
got people. Do you got people?
I'm still self-repped. Let's
all
talk. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Cut the middleman out.
Yeah. I mean, as far as actually facilitating these deals, there's a bunch of ways. Sometimes brands will reach out directly to college athletes. Sometimes they'll go through an icon source. Marketplaces are very good just because it's sort of like a double verification where the marketplace knows that the brand's going to be good for everything. Marketplace knows the athlete's going to be good for everything. They make sure all the deliverables are met, and they put it in a very plain way to make sure the production process is really efficient. And then they help facilitate payment and make sure
You
that
can call Hawke. You know, Hawke does that too.
Yeah,
We can do that.
exactly.
If you like that. I mean, Hawke's a pretty good company. I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
So, hypothetically speaking, great, thank you. Hi. hypothetically speaking, I have a client with a trickier situation for an NIL because they make high-end, fashion-forward athletic shoes for men and women.
Yeah.
So if we're going to sponsor an NIL, that's sort of more intimate because it's not like, I mean, it's a less than ideal situation. So I'm interested in hearing sort of about the pitfalls, treachery of kind of that path.
Well, that sounds like it's a direct, you're selling to that demographic, to the athlete. It's a, right?
Although this tends to be
You talking about competing with Nike or,
demographic, like 25 to 34 is what tends to be the, mostly women tend to be the buyers for these shoes.
so,
Some people, although athletically, they're also good, but they're not inexpensive.
okay, so what's the question then?
Well, it just occurs to me that unlike some of the NIL scenarios that you were describing, this path would be a little bit more treacherous in terms of engaging a student athlete. Where
I don't think it's treacherous. Why do you, what do you think?
because then we're saying, oh, because then we're asking you to say, oh, I wear this, or I use this.
So if you're talking about maybe Nike deals or Adidas deals that the school already has, what you wear on your own time is your own time to wear whatever it is. That's how it's worked out in the past, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and I would also
And we'll
say,
wrap up.
with that demographic that you're looking for, there are women in that demographic who revere some of the college athletes.
Yeah, I mean, if you again going back to kind of that authentic match, if you found a female student athlete who you wanted to kind of be your ambassador for that high-end fashion-forward footwear, to have them be able to really speak on why they partnered with your brand, why they love that footwear, why people should, use their own money to purchase this footwear. As Chase just alluded to, a lot of their followers are going to listen and see exactly what these student athletes are doing. Maybe you go a little bit deeper and you send a custom pair to each of the girls on that team. Now they all have them. Now they're all posting about it as well. That's kind of that spread the web approach that we're discussing as far as, hey, maybe it doesn't hit with that one, but throughout 4 or 5 in different schools and sports, you can certainly get a reach that maybe you weren't even expecting.
Yeah, it's a cheap entry level compared to big sports.
No question.
But I think that's the time that we have. Mike, or whoever, are we done? Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thanks a lot for listening. Hopefully you picked up some things. Didn't talk enough about the SEC. That's good. Thanks
Thank
a lot
you.
for coming.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about AI. Show of hands, who's heard someone say something about AI in the past couple years? Just seeing who's awake. Perfect. So we were talking about what to speak about it today, and I figured talking about our journey with it and how we're leveraging it, give you guys some insights into how we've been thinking about it would probably be helpful so that you can take that to your own businesses, and both on the marketing side and in general, operationally, how do you use AI? So you guys know who we are. I can put this as a placeholder, but one thing about this is we have actually changed the way we present ourselves to new partners, customers, et cetera. Yeah, you probably, if you've known us for a little while, heard your outsourced CMO and marketing team. And we used that for a decade, and we found there was a little irony in the fact that the insecurity of a CMO kind of scales with the size of businesses. So when we started walking into Fortune 100s and 500s, I'd say, we're your outsourced CMO. And they'd say, are you here to take my job? Which was not the case, but we realized we were creating some of our own headwinds. So we really, the past 10 years, we decided to reassess how Hawke has changed, what has it become versus what did we aspire to be when we started. And we really realized this is what differentiates us. So number one, we're AI enabled, which I'll get way more into, Hawke AI and how we've been leveraging that. Number two, tech integrated. We've invested in, as it says, over 60 marketing technology companies. We are very involved on the tech side. We found that technology is really where you're going to win and differentiate in the marketing world. Creative is now iterative. You're constantly trying things, changing things. Coming up with some big campaign is not as impactful these days as trying hundreds to thousands of different things to see what works and using technology to do that. So we really leaned into technology, and then thankfully we've got an incredible team of 200 plus people that have been with us for a long time, a lot of them in this room, and we've just been able to scale now almost 5,000 brands successfully. So this is where it started. Anyone heard of X Prize? Nonprofit? Great. So local nonprofit. It was started by a guy named Peter Diamandis that realized there's this white space between things that are going to be solved because there's a capitalistic incentive that there's money to be made, or things that the government is going to solve because it's important for humankind. And there's this gap in between where there's not really money in it, but it needs to be solved, but government's either going to move too slow or not prioritize it, and something else needs to happen. So we created this model where he would get a corporation as almost a give back side to launch a prize. And the first one was, we need private space flight. So he launched the original X Prize to create private space flight. It was funded by a billionaire out of India. And they basically said, whoever gets to space twice with a rocket first, privately, without NASA, wins, and you get 10 million bucks. Bunch of people then invested to win this prize. The winner became Virgin Galactic. So really cool concept. Their whole nonprofit is around exponential disruption and exponential innovation, because they're always looking at where's the next thing that needs to be disrupted and what are we going to do about it. They're working on harnessing humidity out of the air to create drinking water in India. They're working on teaching at a minimum 3rd grade level just using a tablet with Google partnered in sub-Saharan Africa. So like really cool initiatives. I was hanging out with him and his CEO. I was on their advisory board about 8 years ago. And they love talking about disruption. They can't help it. And they said, well, what's going to disrupt your business? Marketing agencies. And we had this long debate. They kept saying they thought it was going to be freelancers. That in the world of the gig economy, they literally used this term, they used what's going to be the Uber for your taxi company. And they're like, it's going to be this gig economy thing. Like there's going to be marketers everywhere. I'm like, if you guys, and they, again, these are nonprofit guys. I'm like, if you ever ran a business and tried to manage like 15, 20 freelancers and were pulling your hair out because 3 of them just quit to move to Bali, that's not disrupting my business. I'm not worried about that. But thankfully, being in the room, they had been talking about AI. And I was like, I think this AI thing is interesting because if I understand it correctly, it's taking machine learning and algorithmic learning and just getting more and more advanced. So at some point, it's going to replace logic. Like anything logic driven in terms of work can be replaced by AI. You're going to start with basic things like robotic food ordering in McDonald's. But then eventually, like half of what we do is logic. We're looking at data, we're looking at analytics, we're looking at things and then making decisions based on that are not subjective. They're nuanced, but they should be data-based and logic-based. And so if we can teach a computer to do that, that's going to replace a lot of what we do and potentially make us more efficient or potentially disrupt us and make us less important. So they introduced me to a guy named Ray Kurzweil. Anyone know who this is? One of the biggest thought leaders in AI. He's now the head of AI at Google. I think that may have changed since, but for a long time he was. 8 years ago, he wasn't even that yet. He was just a thought leader. And he had a timeline. And the timeline at the time said that so I discovered this guy, this was 2016. And he said by 2018, computers will have the brain power of a mouse. And that's so if you think about how a mouse can navigate a maze on its own, can kind of learn a little bit, like computers will be there in 2018. By about 2023, they'll have the brain capacity, they'll have the computing capacity of a human brain, which means that at that point, they'll be able to mimic artificial intelligence. It won't be artificial intelligence, it'll just look like it because it can think as fast as a person. This guy literally said by the beginning of 2023, ChatGPT launched in November of 2022. So the guy was about 2 months off on a timeline he set out a decade before. So thankfully, this is who they introduced me to and said, you should be building this thing. And this is the guy that knows all the timelines and how this all works. So I read up on him, studied him, and started to develop a concept of like, okay, let's assume this is right because I have no other reason to assume anything else. I don't know anything else. He also said, little quick note, that's why this is here, by 2029 is when we'll have true artificial intelligence. Now he's still alive, still talking about it. He says between 29 and 2030. That's when he's saying. And then this is called the singularity at 2045, which I believe the definition is when one computer has the combined computing power of the entire human race. And they just can't predict what happens at that point. So it's really sci-fi at that. It's a crazy part in human, where they think that humans and computers will mesh and all this stuff will happen then. So it's not that far away, but that's what these guys are predicting. But 2029 is when we're actually gonna have artificial intelligence. So again, I started looking at our reality and what I didn't believe, again, the response from Peter and his CEO, Marcus, when we were talking about this was, oh, well, if you think AI is going to disrupt you, why don't you build it? I was like, I'm a marketing guy. I don't know engineering. I don't know where to start. Thank you. That's a fun response. But they're like, well, you should figure it out. I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks, guys. But I took it seriously and I started planning, okay, well, what does that look like? What's the reality here? And I realized, first off, I am not going to build this AI node. I'm not going to be this center point, the brain. I'm not going to be the one that discovers true AI. We already had IBM Watson at the time, so I already saw the concept of like this supercomputing brain and everybody tapping into it. And so I believed that at the time it was going to be Facebook or Google or someone that was going to come up with this node. And if that's the case, how do I compete in that world? And again, I'm laying this all out so as you think about your own businesses, as this is here now and it will continue to advance, how do I create a moat for myself knowing that someone is going to create artificial intelligence? And that's where data came in. What I realized was, as an agency, we are looking at and digesting more data than almost any other marketing agency out there. And we have a combination of a ton of data from a ton of different brands, because it's not only the brands we're working with, it's all the brands that we look at, all the brands we're partnered with, all the brands using all our partners and all our investments and all these things. We have access to so much marketing data. There's a handful of companies that have that as well. There's Google, there's maybe Facebook, not even Shopify. I'd say Google's probably, there's a few up there, but it's a very limited number of people that also have their own incentives for that data. You know, I don't know how often, no offense, we obviously Google's a huge partner of us, but I don't know how often they're telling their clients not to spend money on Google. And so we're thinking about, from an objective standpoint, what can we do here to actually monitor this? So we started with, we got to start capturing all this data. So we started aggregating as much anonymized data as we could, defining it by its industries, defining it by different categories, and then cleaning it up. And we got to the point where we have a little over 7,000 companies marketing media and revenue data running through our pipes in real time. We then, again, this is about how you build it in your business. Over the past 8 years, we hired 3 different development teams, each time spending over $250,000 to build the platform to visualize that and start our AI system. It didn't work any time. We wasted about $1 million on that. So that'll happen when you go down that path. We learned a lot, but it was, at the end of the day, for us, trying to grab some random dev team and build this didn't work. So brings us to Morpheo. September of 21, I get, or is that right? Yeah, September of 21, I get a call from a guy saying, hey, we have this agency dashboard tool that can help you monitor all the ad spends you have and all these different things and make sure you're not overspending on client accounts and you're flagging when the returns change, and some interesting stuff, an agency dashboard tool. We've seen a bunch of them. But I had just come out of a class that I took that was called Birthing of Giants at University of Texas in Austin. And it was basically, how do you take your business from, they called it a small giant to a big giant, but basically how do you get from where we were at the time to like really a hockey stick again, not the early growth, but like mid-market company to an enterprise company, and how do you really kick it into gear? And I had sat there and we had kind of shelved the Hawke AI idea because we had gone through a third failure. And I got out of there, I was like motivated. I remember emailing my business partner and saying, we got to spend on this again. We got to kick this in. We made 3 mistakes. Let's not make a 4th. Let's do this right. Let's hire a really good engineer. Let's find some vetted people and build this. And this guy emailed me 2 days later and said, I have this dashboard thing. And I went, let's get on a call. I get on a call. He runs me through it. And I said, well, what if I gave you all this market data? Could you plug that in there, benchmark it, create insights around it, and start to show what this data means on a sort of market perspective, not just an individual brand? He's like, yeah, we could definitely do that. I was like, okay. And we went through it, and I'm like, how long would that take? And he said, oh, it would probably just take a couple months. I'm like, stop it. Like, I've spent 8 years on this. Don't tell me it'd take a couple months. And circled back again and said, would you be interested in being acquired? Like, this is exactly what we need. You guys are building a dashboard, but if we partner on this, incorporate what we're doing at Hawke, I think we could take this to a different level. I think we could create automated marketing strategy. And whenever this AI thing becomes real and the technology's there, we could probably launch our own version of AI. He loved it. The team that was involved loved it. And so that was February of 22. We acquired Morpheo and started plugging our data in. And it started in March. I think it was like mid-March is when we really started the integration. They told me 2 months. So May 15th was supposed to be the day. I think I was out of town. So like May 18th, I get on the phone with them just for a recap. And I go, okay, guys, like, how's progress going on that? How's all the integration and the insights? They're like, no, it's done. And for anyone that's ever worked with engineers, you're like, wait, what do you mean it's done? Like, they're like, no, it's really done. And so ended up with an incredible team that's working with us today, and that led to Hawke AI. From there, we rebranded it, we relaunched it. We were able to launch Hawke AI in August of 22. 3 months later, ChatGPT launched. We plugged it into that so we could have natural language processing. And so now we are, again, digesting over 7,000 companies' marketing, media, and revenue data in real time. We can take an individual company, plug it into this. It can tell us exactly what KPIs are missing based on how the market's moving. The easy example I give is we were looking at a company that on Facebook, their CAC had gone up 18%. And obviously that's not good. And so we start looking at why. When you're working in a vacuum, and this is what almost every marketer does, they're looking at last month, last quarter, last year. Well, what happened last quarter? Well, our click-through rate went down, blah, blah, blah. But that's not a valid way of looking at it. Just like you wouldn't look at your performance in the stock market over last quarter, other than just a benchmark of how it's going, but not to make a financial decision. That's why things like the indexes exist. So we basically created the index on marketing. You can look at all these different KPIs, and in that case, the cost across Meta had gone up 23%. So their cost was up 18%. Everything was up 23%. So the decision there is no longer, how are we going to fix our ads? How are we going to redo our creative? Because it's actually performing better than everybody else is on average. So then the decision is, this is what happened on Meta. Do we pull our budget back from Meta? Does this work for our business even though it's not optimal? Like, this is what it's costing now? Or do we want to now make some changes in where we're spending our money? So it changes the decision-making tree when you have that data. So we actually applied all those insights into Hawke AI. So instead of having to figure out what to do, it's actually just telling you, hey, because of this, these are the things you should do to fix this. And now we're starting to teach AI that if this happens and this happens, the if and then statements, and these are the changes you should make, the goal being eventually to actually have this making those changes and running by you like, hey, we want to pull your budget off Facebook, move it to Google, shout out. And this is why, and this is what we want to do. And then you just approve it. So that's kind of what we're going down the path. Again, the whole concept being, how do we leverage this sort of paradigm shift in the market? And to be clear, I'm not one to chase the hype. Did not buy into NFTs, did not chase crypto, have a little bit, but dabble. But AR, VR, all these different things that have always been these hype trains in the marketing world, I don't believe in chasing the shiny object. I think this is actually a shift similar to the internet, where 10 years from now, every company, it's like not having an AI strategy is like not having a website. And so having something incorporated, but I don't think that means everybody's going to create their own internet service provider. Like, it's going to be tapping into, Gemini and things like that to actually leverage what is already out there and just figuring out, how do I win in that environment? So getting into generative AI, which is another big part. So there, I look at this as two different parts in the sense of AI. So what I've been talking about is the logic side of it. This is more the creative side of it with generative. Coming up with creative on content side, on a creative side, on an imagery side. I think that these are getting better and better, but my favorite metaphor I always try to lead people with on the AI side, think of it as an army of 17-year-old interns and everything you could do with that. So they can create some great content and some great imagery, but you probably want a pro to then take a second look. They can probably help with a lot of the things you're doing and save you a lot of time, but it's going to take adult supervision. That's super important. Same thing with Hawke AI, by the way. That's why it's not just let it run. And when I say it's going to come up with recommendations to approve, that is very specific, because I would never let this stuff just run and do it yourself. And we can talk about some of the tools you've got Midjourney, which is getting really cool, but let's be real, Midjourney looks like Midjourney. When you run an image through Midjourney, it looks like it came out of Midjourney. That will continue to evolve and change, and if no one knows what I'm talking about, it's just like image generation. You can ask it to create any image you could think of, and it'll create this cool picture, cool photo, whatever you want, and it can be a great ad. But if you actually run them in ads, anybody that's been paying attention, it's going to look like an AI-generated ad. And it still looks like that. And I think it'll be a little while before it's not, because I do think the nuance, the human eye is still trained. Anyone here seen those AI people on Instagram? They're eerie. It is really good. They're really close. At the same time, something's up. Even though you can't put your finger on why, the eyes move weird a little bit or something, skin looks too smooth, whatever it is, it just doesn't look human. And we have that nuance. And that's really where that next step of AI is going to come in is, and again, you have Go Charlie, which is on the content side. You've got Jasper as well on the content side. You've got a lot of tools right now that can help you streamline and get to an answer quicker, get some thought joggers out there, but they don't replace people. And so the idea of this all being this dystopian future where nobody can work anymore because AI is taken over, I don't personally believe in. This little key reason for that is human adoption and the ability for people to adapt while those changes are happening. It doesn't happen as fast as people fear. The example I'd give is I've heard for about a decade that we would run out of, we would have no use for truck drivers by 2025. That has been the date. And we are currently in 2024 with a truck driver shortage. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be a time in the next few years that trucks will start to be autonomous, but there's going to be something else that people need to do because of that, and it opens up new markets. And the thing is, if we do actually create a place where a lot of this stuff can happen automatically, and again, taking driverless cars is another example, that just means that we're going to be more productive there, which means it's going to create more jobs somewhere else. And so that is generally more what happens than just in like the short-term pain for the truck drivers means they have to figure out a new job, a new career. That part is definitely a painful part. And I would advise anyone here to understand that like the only certainty is change. And so it changes constant. So like all of us are going to have different jobs in a decade. And how subtle or how great that is will change, but staying on top of this stuff, paying attention is important. Being in fear of it, thinking that this is going to be some massive shift, I think is overestimating how quick people adopt. Because the technology, a lot of it's really interesting and a lot of it is there in some ways, but people take a long time to actually buy things, do things. There's early adopters that will talk about this, that'll tell you that, we're going to be living on Mars in 3 years. And then there's everyone else that goes, yeah, let's see a few people go there for like a decade and then maybe I'll follow. I think so that's really on the AI side. What I wanted to talk about is just, this is something to think about over time. The thing I'd caution as well, which we caution a lot of times in any type of change in marketing, do not chase that shiny object. Like, don't waste all your time trying to chase how this could change your business when you have your business to run. Because again, it won't change that fast. There are things that can make you more efficient. And I'm going to re-emphasize, I would think about what could I do with an army of 17-year-old interns? Like, that's where we are right now. And that's great. Like, that's actually very valuable. Like, all these things that you would normally go get interns for, or, you wouldn't do because it's too tedious, or you're paying someone a ton of money to go do stuff that's probably below their skill level. Get all this stuff augmenting them, and you can get a lot more efficient. One thing that's happened for Hawke Media that's been great is our average salary per head has gone up significantly because we've been able to augment them with technology. So people on average are making almost 4 times as much money as when we started Hawke Media 10 years ago. On average, our average salary is almost 4 times the amount, mostly because of technology augmentation. So want to open it for questions. No, I fired through it. I talk fast too. Yeah.
On the content media side, I know we've all experienced like the uncanny AI photos and content. What do you find as a media agency is the path to least resistance to get there, but still keep that kind of human element when it comes to content, branded content specifically?
Yeah, so leveraging the AI side for branded content, I still believe that you should be creating content like authentically, like not using AI for too much of it. I think it's cool for thought joggers, but like I wouldn't use a Mid-Journey image in one of my advertisements. I think it's just not there yet. I think like one thing we're using it for is synthesizing content. So creating a ton and then having it slice it up. So like editing and like, again, going back to like more of the task orientation, the things you could give a 17-year-old to do, that's what I'd give them. Like, hey, chop this up, find some good clips, put them together. Like now we have, let's film real content for a day, but then synthesize that down and have AI do part of that. What's that tool we use? I think Kiara uses it. Opus Clips. That's one of the ones we use where it's a good example. Like we bought a personal branding agency and I became a customer too. And they're like, you need to post once a day on Reels and on TikTok. So if you could go film for several hours a week or a month, I'm like, yeah, I don't have that bandwidth, but I have, turns out like 2,000 podcast interviews I've done. Let's just go digest that all, clip it up, put it out there. And now like you can go find me saying just about anything at this point because I've been doing 10 years of interviews. So it's like that would be something I would have given an intern that now we can just run Opus clips, and I think it's costing us like $50 a week to generate content where it's already out there. So, yeah, yeah,
Can I ask a question as the newbie week one?
yeah. No, you're good.
So 2 questions. One is, how often should a brand be doing an AI snapshot benchmark of what is going on to be able to like make adjustments as necessary to have their optimal performance? And then the other question has to do with the actual data sets going into the AI. I'm wondering about sentiment analysis and Net promoter score analysis.
Yep.
Because I'm just thinking like in terms of like all of the sort of digital performance analysis, how important is it also to be understanding how people are perceiving the content and what their like sort of emotional reaction or response
Yeah.
is to it?
Yeah, so the first part, in terms of how often to look at AI and how often to audit your own marketing, so ours works in real time. So you literally can log in anytime, any day, look at how things are going and how they're trending. That being said, and I actually really like sharing this because it has to do with marketing in general. Everybody has heard the line from marketing like, oh, it just takes time, that explanation. Yeah, so that's true, but it can be explained. I hate the like, it just takes time, just cause. And what it comes down to is the idea of a sales cycle or consideration period. And it's that simple. It really is that people take time to buy things. And different companies, different products, different services have a different average sales cycle. And so, Hawke Media, I know ours cold because I think it's one of the more important metrics, is 24.4 days on average someone takes to decide to work with Hawke Media from the first time that we talk to them. 24.4 days. So what that means is if I run a marketing campaign for a week and we're 7 days in, I don't really know how it's performed. It takes me 24.4 days to know the half-life of the returns on a marketing campaign. And so for e-commerce, as an example, for any product businesses, it's usually correlated with the average order value. So for $50, it's about 3 weeks. $100, it can be about 5 weeks. $200, it's about 6 weeks, and it trails off between 2 or 3 months. But what that means is every marketing campaign takes on average between 3 weeks and 3 months, I'm talking in the brand world, to see the first half-life of efficacy. So if I run a campaign for a week, and it usually takes me a month to make a sale, and I'm judging the sales a week later, I have no idea what I'm looking at. And so early indicators are there. Maybe you have click-through rates on your ads. Maybe you have some sort of engagement metric. So there's things to look at that you can see the trends, but actually judging the returns on your marketing in under that half-life of your sales cycle is just a way to cut off your nose to spite your face. And frankly, exactly what happened with the iOS 14 change 2 years ago. So to explain that real quick, when Apple cut off Facebook from tracking, they had to take their tracking window down from 28 days to 7. That's all that changed, like in some retargeting stuff. And so what's interesting about that is all that happened is if you take your entire return window from 28 days to 7, it obviously looks worse. The problem is this, and I talk about this a lot with why I started Hawke, 99% of marketers out there have no idea what they're doing. And all of those marketers went and logged into Facebook and went, oh my God, my returns are down. Facebook is dead. We're out. And and turns out it was a double-edged sword because not only were they wrong about that because they were just looking at a 7-day window instead of 28-day, they also actually cut off their Facebook ads thinking that they were hurting, but they were actually driving great business. And then the businesses all started declining. So you saw this massive decline, especially in e-commerce in 2022, that was completely self-inflicted by, frankly, dumb marketers. So it's really important to remember that sales cycle when you're looking at these things. And it's something you can usually ascertain through seeing like when did you collect email addresses and how long does it take them to buy, and having a good idea for averages here so that you can start to run all your marketing measurement that way. So that's what I would say in terms of when to really assess is really let these campaigns play out over the course of your sales cycle. Your other question, I'm trying to remember. Sentiment analysis, yeah. So I have kind of mixed feelings on sentiment analysis. So NPS score I think is great. Like it's such a basic, simple metric that like knowing if people would recommend you and having a way of gaining that is always helpful. In terms of sentiment analysis, a lot of times I see these using soft things like what are the comments on social media and what are people talking about, and the actionability of like how are people talking about it on social media or what their reported sentiment is versus taking real numbers like are they purchasing, are they voting with their wallet, so to speak. That's more what I look at, because it's really hard to, I feel like sentiment is a way for a lot of people to either make themselves confirm a bias or try to give evidence to something that you should be able to find more objective evidence of, is what I've seen in sentiment. Now, that is, if you're spending a large amount of money on a large branding campaign, you're doing Super Bowl ads and things like that, I think you're spending enough that having another data point's helpful, but you have to be to that scale, in my opinion. Other questions? Yeah.
So my business is a platform business. So in your AI console, obviously I can see the snapshot and how my brand performing relative to maybe my comp set or across the market. Are you guys going to have an API where I can access those data? Because I'm actually marketing those brands too to try and get them in my platform or figure that out.
Meaning marketing to the other users of the platform?
No, marketing the brands you're tracking.
Yeah, so no, they're anonymized. So yeah, right now, that was one very specific thing that made it so brands would give us their data is we do not say who it is. Yeah. Anyone else? I'll be hanging out. I can give you guys a little bit of a break, but thank you. And thank you for coming out today. Really appreciate it.
All right, what's up, everybody? So today's session, we're going to talk a little bit more about Performance Max, right? So the idea here is more on the practical side, things that you can do today that's going to help drive growth, whether you're e-com brand, lead gen brand, or SaaS, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of theory when it comes to Performance Max, right? Because it's new and AI and all this other stuff, but there's the practical aspect of it too. So a couple key things we're gonna cover off is how to really leverage first-party data for Performance Max. The other piece of it is how to essentially act, what the role of marketers in terms of being that guiding hand for AI and machine learning, and how to use market opportunity insights to maximize budget and drive performance. And the last part of this is going to be a little bit more geared toward the e-commerce aspect of it with feed optimization. So why are we talking about this, right? The way I like to describe Performance Max to a lot of our clients is that it's not a marketer's campaign in the traditional sense. Marketers love to get into the weeds. They like to crack things open. They like to find, how to circumvent in the rules to gain an advantage, right? That's not what Performance Max is, right? But the reason we actually recommend Performance Max to most of our clients at this point is because it works really well. It does drive revenue, it does drive results. And honestly, when I pulled these numbers for this presentation, I was a little surprised in terms of how much budget we're putting into Performance Max. Over the last year, Performance Max is accounting for 47% of all of our ad spend across our all of our Google clients. E-com, lead gen, SaaS, it doesn't matter, 47%. And at the same time, it's driving 40% of all of our conversions, which is a massive amount. So really, this is the reason why we're talking about it. Honestly, if you just asked me, I would have said, oh, way higher percentage going on search and whatever else, or even video. But this is the reason we're talking about it, because this is just the beginning of what it's going to be. We're not talking about Performance Max as a campaign type. Part of what we'll get into here is that it is a methodology that marketers, brands, we have to learn how to use, right? So let's talk about some roadblocks, right? What are the issues? This sounds easy, right? Everything we're talking about, it should be automated, right? It should be making our lives easier. How can this be a challenge? Why isn't it not a no-brainer? Why are we not just turning on Performance Max and it driving leads and revenue for us, right? Well, there's a couple pieces to that. So first part of it is there is naturally a lot of misinformation when it comes to what Performance Max is, how to structure it, how it works, right? Because it is this tool that is doing a lot of different things. So in simplicity comes complexity always, right? And then again, half of it is marketers trying to really apply their old school optimization habits to how Performance Max should operate. They're trying to treat it like standard shopping and really hyper segmenting and all these different things, where that's to the detriment of performance. But then it also goes the other way of people just taking a blanket approach. We launched the Performance Max campaign and it's not really doing much for us, right? So that's where the complexity comes into it. It's finding that, threading the needle essentially. And I'm a PPC nerd. That's essentially half of what I do on LinkedIn. So enjoy this meme. But so how to work with Performance Max, right? So this is the beginning of how a lot of ad platforms are going to operate. Google was one of the first to launch a product like this, Performance Max. It's kind of a all-in-one solution. It's doing a little bit of everything, right? It's running, don't worry about keywords. It's gonna tackle the search part of it. There's no more, don't worry about shopping anymore. We're gonna run shopping, a little bit of display, a little bit of video. Google's really, essentially, in all intents and purposes, the first platform to do this, right? And then since they've launched this, I want to say 2 years, could be even longer, 3 years ago, there's obviously other platforms have tried to imitate, right? We have Advantage Plus from Meta, and then I think Microsoft just launched, they're creatively named, I think it's called Performance Max as well. So you're gonna see that become a trend. And again, it's not just a campaign type, right? This is just how all media is gonna be bought going forward, right? So the role of Performance Max and automation is it's automating all the pieces of that funnel, right? The who, the what, the where, the how, right? But we have some input on every single one of those facets. So that's how we have to work within those parameters, right? The way this machine learning works is it's analyzing for trends in the system, right? It wants data. We just talked a lot about AI and data, but at the end of the day, it wants smooth data trends that it can then learn and optimize off of, right? So that's what Performance Max does. Where marketers come into that is really being that guiding hand of giving it that clean data. Hey, you're looking for data. This is the data that you should be optimizing for this brand. Focus on these areas. This isn't as important to my brand. This is kind of my brand is trying to appeal to this, whatever. So we're giving it that additional information. And then really the role of the brands is that this is a big change like we're talking about. So really it's enabling that kind of language and methodology within the company. So when you're getting on your marketing meetings, right, and you're talking to the marketers, it's how to better speak to that, right, in terms of do we have the data that we need to optimize for Mother's Day, right? Or do we have, the same way we talk about the right creative, right? So it's all about leveraging the first party data. So this is something that we just need to speak to it better in terms of do we have what we need for AI to properly optimize? And again, this is probably really, really going to change. Marketing meetings are really going to change over the next 10 years. It's not going to look like how it used to be, where you just get on like, okay, you can get this many clicks, and what changes did you make? I increased the smart bidding 20% within the threshold. Like, no, that's not how these conversations are really going to go, right? So there's all these different pieces of it. So how can we do it, right? How do we get the best out of Performance Max? So we're saying, hey, all these pieces are automated, but there are levers that we can pull. One of the most important levers is audience signals. Audience signals is really going to be the engine behind the Performance Max campaigns. That's our way of telling the machine learning, hey, find us more customers like this. So really being able to point in a direction is actually a very, that's very extremely useful, right? So with that, when we want to point in the right direction, the absolute best way to do that is going to be with leveraging your existing first-party data. This is where all of that kind of comes into play. whether exporting your customer list from Shopify, you're exporting from your CRM, your email lists, integrating with your CDP, all these different places. It's time to put it to work for us. We already have some data into place, right? Whether it's customers who've again converted multiple times, or if it's we don't have that much data and it's whatever it is, inputs we want to go off of. We have to stop having these individual platforms reinvent the wheel, work from scratch, find us customers, where we already have data on what kind of customers we want, who our best customers currently are. So it's a matter of just putting that to work. So that's the importance of audience signals as the main engine. So some things not to do with the audience signals, right? One of the most common things I see going astray with people running Performance Max campaigns is bad audience signals. If you give bad inputs, you're gonna get bad outputs. Even if you have good inputs in there and you have bad output inputs in there as well, you're gonna get bad outputs. So it's really just a matter of having clean data to optimize towards. So one of the common mistakes I see when we get new brands is there's no audience signals, so there's no advantage. We're not telling the system what to go for, so it's just kind of operating in the dark. That's fine. You could probably find success that way. It's just gonna take twice as long, right? And nobody has that much time and money, just stab around in the dark. So anyway, with other audience signals bad audience signals is using just very generic data or just using generic interest audiences. That's not very helpful, because what's gonna end up happening is that at this moment, on a practical level, there could be people from Google here who disagree with what I'm gonna say, but the system right now optimizes toward where there's more data, right? So if you say, hey, this is a list of all my best customers, there's, there's 2,000 people in this list, right? We wanna definitely try to optimize toward finding more customers like this, but then you also add in a bunch of interest audiences like, hey, this person's a dog lover, let's try to target dog lovers and all this other stuff. Well, there's a couple thousand people in your customer list, but then there's millions of people in these other interest audiences. Which one do you think the system's gonna optimize toward first? Definitely gonna go toward where there's a bigger audience, right? So because of that, one of the key things we've seen over the last, I'd say probably year and a half, really deeply experimenting with Performance Max, and you guys see how heavily we're invested in it, is just using the high value customer lists to optimize toward. So again, going off of that, what are examples of good audience signals? So concept is the same regardless of if it's e-com, if it's lead gen, or SaaS, whatever, it doesn't matter. List of whatever your best customers are. The more data, the better. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that we need at least 1,000 users in each of these different lists or audiences. So that could be a roadblock for some smaller brands. And if that's the case, then okay, if you don't have customers that have purchased multiple times to fill up a list of 1,000, right? That's fine. Then you just have to go a little bit more broad. Then what's a little bit more broad than that, but still kind of a quality signal? People who have added to cart, 1,000 people have added to cart, right? Okay, if you don't have that either, then go one step a little bit broader. But definitely the mindset is you want to go as specific as possible, and that's what you want to optimize toward, like your best customers, like anyone who spent more than the average amount on your site, or high LTV, or they've purchased on 3 separate occasions, or they've bought on every Mother's Day in the last 3 years, right? Those are the customers that you want to use for the audience signals. And then same thing on the lead gen side, any big deal values or whatever, anything that can be considered, hey, this is exceptional and we want to train the system toward it. So in terms of audience signals and the engine, right, and as far as optimization, that's going to be a key piece. Hands down, right, as far as, again, the role of the marketer and providing, guiding the system of like, hey, focus on these things to find us more customers and drive impact. Hands down, the number one issue I see or mistake I see is from any kind of brand that comes to the door is they're targeting the entire country. That's usually the default. I could not just open a blank Google Ads account or whatever, and I can be like, let me guess, you're targeting the whole country for this campaign. Why? You know, it's the whole point of paid media is if we're paying a premium to drive users to our site, and then we should be prioritizing some users over others. So a common mistake that brands do, they spread themselves too thin. And one of the ways we can augment our performance is with market insights. So this is an example of market insights that we're able to pull with our partners at Google, right? So Google pulled this. This is called the BDI CDI report. So it's brand demand index compared to the category demand index. So where is their search volume for the brand name itself versus where is their search volume for the category itself, right? So we create a matrix and we end up looking at something like this. So from a paid media standpoint, right, we should more than likely be putting at least 80 to 90% of our budget into the areas in yellow and green. This is where the most growth is going to come from. And then you might want to look at the areas in blue and red as, you know, we don't really need to be targeting these areas in 2024 with our paid media efforts, right? If we drive organic sales or whatever, you know, that's completely fine. But from a paid media standpoint, maybe that's not worth our focus right now. So the areas in green are going to be your bread and butter areas because there's high category demand and there's high brand demand. So the concept here is you should expect better performance and results out of the areas in green, right? So when we're talking about bid strategies and ROAS targets and CPA targets, right, you should naturally expect better performance from these areas. The highest growth is going to come from the areas in yellow. That's really where you want to put focus into because there's high category demand, but there's low brand demand. So the whole concept here is if we concentrate some of our marketing spend into these areas, are we more likely to drive growth more quickly? And the answer to this question is usually yes. So this is something we've done for a lot of brands over the last couple of years. And it's actually really impactful, and you can monitor the impact of this over time as well. You can pull the same report, you know, monthly basis might not be as helpful, but depending on the brand, right? But pulling it quarterly, or every 6 months, or every year, looking back on it, and seeing if you've made progress in these areas. But so where you would apply this is taking this kind of approach and applying it to, let's say, we're talking about Performance Max here. You would have a Performance Max green campaign, and then you'd have a separate Performance Max yellow campaign, right? And then exactly what we're saying. So we might try to speak to these customers in the potential customers in the areas in yellow, right? Where it's like, hey, we really want to grow here. We might want to speak to them differently versus areas that people already know us. And again, we can set different targets and we can optimize that separately. So taking this kind of approach, especially with Performance Max, we've seen really good results. And then moving on to the e-commerce portion, right? This is probably the least sexy side of anything we've talked about today, right? When it comes to feed optimization, where you just, in your mind, I'll close your eyes, spreadsheet, just full of stuff, right? That's what feed optimization is. But the reason this is important is when we're talking about Performance Max for e-commerce, we really want at least 80% of the budget to be going towards shopping, right? So for e-commerce purposes, when we say Performance Max, we really mean shopping, okay? And feed optimization is probably more important than ever just because of exactly what we've been talking about. It's so heavily automated. So the more information we give the system, the better it's going to perform for us. Whereas, 5 years ago with standard shopping, yeah, feed optimization was always important, but it wasn't as critical as it is today because of that fact. So when it comes to feeds, right, most brands think they have a good feed, but they really don't. It's one of those neglected things. There's a lot of confusion around it. Like, hey, if I make changes to my Google feed, is that going to change things on my, on my Shopify, whatever? It doesn't, right? You want to kind of treat that a little bit separately, but it's kind of pulling in from that same data, right? So most brands don't have well optimized feeds, and this is really going to hold you back because we're talking about shopping performance, right? If you if you don't make the feed optimizations and don't fix the feed, you can't, you should feel really lucky if you're seeing really good results on the Google Ads side. So feed optimization is something you want to focus on. And then the reason for that, again, is we essentially want to think like a machine when it comes to the feed, right? The more structured data, little pieces of information on who this is going to serve for, the better it's going to do. Google doesn't know what your product is. There is a couple of snippets of text, whatever. It's not really reading all of that. It doesn't know that, yeah, okay, this is a toothbrush, right? But it doesn't know, like, no, this toothbrush, though we're trying to, this is AI enabled. This is meant for, like, it's a luxury toothbrush for, whatever gen, right? It doesn't know all that kind of information. So we have to give as much contextual information for it to know who to serve for, when to serve, how often to serve. And another common issue that I see with the lack of feed optimization is brands that want to scale but that aren't able to scale. It's not just a matter of performance, but just even being able to serve, like, hey, we're doing well, we want to serve more. My budget's up, but it's not spending it. The answer to that is usually the feed. There's things missing in the feed, and when you fill in that information, then you start serving a lot more. And it's not even just serving, right? We just want to serve to the right customers, and that's also going to help boost your performance, right? So there is a lot of confusion when it comes to, again, the feed, just because there's all these different aspects to it. There's the pieces that people can actually see, right? And we're talking about feed, we're talking about the shopping ads. When you Google anything, it'll show up in the shopping tab, it'll show up on the search tab as well, the images on the top. And then for e-commerce brands, again, this is really what you want to focus on mostly, because the power of shopping ads is it's on a cost per click basis. As a brand, we're only paying if someone clicks, right? How impactful to be able to see what the product looks like, to get a little bit of information, and to also see what the cost is before clicking on an ad. And obviously, when it comes to e-commerce, that's the power of shopping over something like search, where it's just a bunch of words. I have no inclination of what this product is going to be when I click on here, what kind of shoes they sell, and that's the power of shopping. So in order to demystify what are things I need to focus on, okay, you're saying my feed is maybe not good, right? What would I want to focus on? The best thing to do is to just Google what your actual product is. Because this search and what this looks like will be different depending on whatever the product category is. And you'll see different filters and attributes on the side. Those are things that you'd want to incorporate into your feed if it's relevant for the product, right? Like, obviously, if we're selling plants, it's not going to say on the side, hey, what kind of style do you want? Do you want, crossbody bags, right? So the best thing to do is to just Google what the product category is, and all these different filters that you see here are potential things that we want to make sure, hey, is this clear in our feed that this is what type of bag this is, or this is what color it is? All these different facets to it. So, even little things like the color attribute, right? It's not as major one, but a big one I see is usually in the product feeds, the color attribute. If it's even there, it'll be like, it'll be like golden rust brown, right, or whatever. Google doesn't really know what that is. As you can see here, you hover. It's all about the primary colors. You can have that be in the titles, right? This is what our brand names, browns, right? That's fine. But when it comes to the actual product attribute, what we should be optimizing toward, it's usually these primary colors. It's usually what you're going to see on this on the Google SERP. So, what are some of the attributes that we should be focusing on from the feed side, right, in order to drive better results from Performance Max, and especially, again, when we're talking about on the e-commerce, right? Well, if you want to crush it with shopping, these are the attributes that we need to make sure. You have to feel really confident in it. If you think that, like, maybe I think it's good, our agency said they're handling it, right? You want to make sure, right? When it comes to titles, this is one of the few attributes that customers can actually see and read. the way it works is every word to the left is more important than to the right? So there's more bias put toward the words in the beginning of the product titles. So we want to take extra effort into making sure we're maximizing the amount of length that we have in the titles. We're not just put two, 3-word titles. We actually have all the relevant information in there, but then we're also presenting the most relevant information in the beginning. And then a mistake that I see a lot of smaller or newer brands make is that they'll put the brand name in the beginning of the product title. That's fine, but you're really kind of wasting space. So for larger brands, definitely I recommend putting the brand name in the beginning because the brand name actually holds clout. But if you're a smaller brand, right, it's mostly going to be about, okay, you're trying to carve out market share. What's more relevant information I can put in the beginning of the product title. So that's how product titles work. And then last thing I'll mention on that end is that this is one of the few places that you kind of want to do keyword stuffing, even though Google doesn't really, I think, encourage that. But I'm sure if you check out right now, I don't know if I had it on my last example here, but brands, they'll do things like put in Mother's Day into the title, just so increased relevancy. And Google does take in the titles into account. So titles definitely one of the most important things on the feed side, and one of the few things that people can actually see. A lot of it is usually the unsexy stuff happening on the back end and in the spreadsheets. The other common mistake I see brands making is lack of GTINs. GTINs are important if you're a retailer, right, a third-party retailer, or you sell, there's other third-party retailers selling your products, then that's when you really want a GTIN. If your product only exists on your site, then not as important. You don't necessarily need the GTINs, but it's good to have. But if there's other, again, companies selling your products, then you absolutely need to have the GTIN. This is really going to hurt your performance and really hold you back if you don't have the GTINs. And what GTINs are, it's just a barcode number. It's the same exact thing, it's just a barcode number. Usually it's missing, or brands will launch new products. Obviously, hey, there's this new collection or whatever, and common issue we'll see is like the GTIN's not pulling into the feed. So we always want to make sure that the GTIN is relevant for every single product has the GTIN. And if you have issues on like, hey, where can I find the barcode, or I don't have this, how can I get this? I'm in a competitive space and I really want my shopping ads to show, then I think there's a couple different places you can register for the barcodes. I think GS1 is the common one, but long story short, at least for your main products, you definitely want to make sure you have all the GTINs for all the individual products. I probably won't go through every single one of these one by one, but a couple just to mention as well as Google product categories. So this is going to be a specific taxonomy. You cannot take liberties with the Google product categories. There's a lot of different Google product categories. They're very specific. I think the most specific one I've ever seen is like they have Google product category for absinthe fountains. I don't know how often you guys shop for absinthe fountains, but so most likely for most of the products in this room that they have a category for, but you want to definitely make sure that every single of the products have the Google product category. Product type is very similar to the Google product category. Common mistake I see with product type is that it's either lacking completely or there's one level of product type. People treat it like it's just the feed in general, like they're taking notes somewhere. They'll just drop in a couple words, right? Well, it's like that's not the point. You want to give it the structured data. So product type, you want to have at least 4 levels of it. Let me see if I have an example here. So at the top there, that's an example of the Google product categories and how you see there. You want to be as specific as possible. The product type is going to look essentially exactly the same, except the difference is that you can take liberties with the product type versus where you can't with the Google product categories. So when it comes to the product type, right, it's like, okay, let's go. I'm selling, bushes. I sell blueberry bushes, right? Well, the Google product category in this case, you want to get as specific as possible. First level would be home and garden. The second level would be plants. The third level would be indoor and outdoor plants. And then the fourth level would be bushes and shrubs, right? Giving it that kind of detailed, structured data is what we want. with the product type, right, that's an opportunity for us to like add more, right, or change it up, right? So instead of, hey, if we want to get more specific than bushes and shrubs, that's the place to do it. We can tell the system, hey, these are blueberry bushes that we're selling, whatever, right? So it's going to be very similar, but then we can actually take liberties with that. And there's a couple other basic things. These are all going to be quick, like the age group, condition, material, right? These are usually, again, missing from a lot of the feeds that we see, or it'll be incomplete. These definitely has a significant impact on how often you show up for. And same thing with kind of color and gender. So for most brands, these are kind of going to be the same across the board, right? In terms of whatever gender is, it's whether it's unisex or the products are male focused or female. And same thing with condition for 99.9% of not just brands in this room, but in general, most of the products people are selling are brand new condition, right? That sounds very basic. Does that really impact how often I'm showing up? It does, right? So we want to make sure that's in there. We have the condition attribute, and then we want to make sure that for every single product, we're marking these things, right? So a couple takeaways here, right? Diving into the heart of being, what's practical growth with Performance Max. What are things that we can do, right? Well, the unique thing again with Performance Max is that it is this universal tool for lead gen, for e-commerce, for SaaS, right? It does all these different things. It shows up on search. It shows up on YouTube. It shows up on display, right? But there's a couple things that we want to focus on, right? When it comes to the lead gen side, we want it to predominantly serve on the search side. That's what's really going to drive the impact and the results. And then it kind of goes the same way on the e-commerce side where, yeah, it's cool. It's going to do a little bit of remarketing for you. It's going to serve some video ads sometimes, right? That's awesome. But really kind of the heart of it is going to be shopping, right? So when you say Performance Max for e-commerce, you really you mean shopping. So the best thing you can do there is give it that first-party data, leverage it. You were sitting on a bunch of data on all these different platforms. It doesn't just have to be Google Ads data, right? From all these different platforms, your CRM, the CDP, whatever. Put it to use. The more data, the better. And then it's even, again, small brands, you'll have to leverage whatever data that you do have. If the most quality indicator that you have is like, hey, we got customers that have added to cart a bunch of times, that's great, that's fine. To give it that data, that's definitely valuable. But then for larger, more enterprise brands, there's really a lot more that you can do. You can get hyper specific, right? Like if you're selling, whatever, shoes, right? Or you sell a bunch of different types of shoes, right? We sell boots, we sell sneakers, right? And then you have specific types of sneakers, right? Then we can have customer lists or leverage first-party data around that. So all of our best, white shoe purchasers, let's go for people who really, if we have that much data, then we can definitely do it. And we've seen that work well for a lot of enterprise brands, and they can get specific, like all of our Star Wars customers and all of our, Indiana Jones customers or whatever the licenses that they're into, right? You can get that specific if you have the data. The other piece of it is, as far as the role of the marketers is really being that guiding hand, right? We want to give it as much of our insights as possible, tell it where to focus on. I think a mistake that a lot of people make is, spreading their budget too thin, just targeting the entire country where kind of better served targeting specific areas. That's how you grow out. It's the name of the game is market share. The way you grow out market share is you always have to have a home base and then you grow out from there. You're never going to be everything to everyone at the same time. So there's a lot of resources that we have, especially Google can put together and pull as well to help inform some of these insights. And then just really, I want to emphasize the importance of the feed optimization. That should really be part of the, kind of the language of when we're talking about e-commerce and, optimizing. So that's all I got.